Ngugi Marhemu became the head of the department. I was postgraduate tutor with Ngugi. They also introduced the course on Swahili literature. Now, just short, small footnote. When kitabu uchambuzi wa maandishi ya Kiswahili was published, i.e. this one, I got the proofs in Southampton, where I was living, and the late Sheikh Abdullah Nasir was the OUP editor. So he had written there in the proofs, uchambuzi wa maandishi ya Kiswahili, kitabu cha kwanza. So when I got it, I wrote back, I said, Abdullahi, kitabu cha kwanza, vipi kitabu cha kwanza? Mimi sina kitabu cha pili. Iondoshe. Akasema hakunijibu. Kilitoka vile vile kitabu cha kwanza. So I was hostage to fortune. But then in Nairobi, I was acquitted after because we then published this one. 1977, kitabu cha pili. And the students there, we dedicated this book to Marhemu Shihabuddin Chiragdin, who had passed away then, and that was 77. And these are this is a mixture of students from both Kenya and Tanzania. So we had Sarah Mirza on mafunzo ya Kinjekitile. She's, I think, in America. She had published something with Heinebusch, book from America. And Kigiti Sengo is on Alikiona, is in Dar es Salaam. We have Yohana Mcha from Dar es Salaam on Wakati Ukuta, and wahusika wa Kinjekitile by the late Professor J. Kitsao, who was a student at that time. And then I wrote on Mashetani, and we had Professor Mohamed Bakari on Nahodha Fikirini, Hadithi ya Kimambao, Maisha ya Kiswahili, Fresques Lahabi. Lahabi joined the second class of my 3-year, which was 69-70. And then we had Saifu Kiango on Rosa Mystica, which is interesting because you have the author of Rosa Mystica right in the same book as, it was very interesting. And then I wrote on Farsi's book, Kurwa Nadoto. At that time, it was quite famous at that time. So I was acquitted in that respect. And then, well, finish it now. Looking back, what were the major challenges that we had faced? I've mentioned one already. I mean, literary criticism, how you go about putting up theories, or rather looking at the frame within which you analyze as such. And it was criticized, our first book, by my former teacher, Lyndon Harris, who criticized it. And then, of course, there was Ramon Olney, Aggressive Prose, his book, where he defended our book, the very first one. Also creating terminologies, which Clarissa mentioned. How do you go about creating terminologies? If you notice, both the books have the word maandishi, uchambuzi wa maandishi ya Kiswahili. Today you would not write that. Today one would say uchambuzi wa fasihi ya Kiswahili, which of course there are books on that. So again, the transition from maandishi to fasihi. Here I wrote michezo ya kuigiza, and then of course the word tamthilia was created from the Arabic. So you had all this process going on during that particular year. And now, when I look back over these 57 years, gosh, it's been a long time. I mean, it's from 1968 to now. And gratefully, we find now so many books. I mean, you have, right here, you have so many authors on different aspects of Swahili outlook, Swahili life, Swahili philosophy, you have so many. And let me end by one footnote, and that is when I was teaching in '68, I wrote a little article which got published, I will show you, and an approach to the teaching of Swahili literature. I presented that at a seminar in 1969. It has been published at '68 because the journal Swahili was published late, so I got the article got in. There was the head of the Department of Literature called Arnold Kettle from England. He is an expert on Shakespeare and the novels. He listened to me, and then he made a remark, which I still remember. And he was talking about theory, because I was talking about theory. And for some reason, I might have come across as somebody who was looking at criticism, literary criticism in English as the model, and that English criticism has arrived, and we in Swahili are just beginning our journey. And he commented on that, and he said, look, English has no way reached any pinnacle. There is no pinnacle in theory. Theory evolves, and the way it evolves, it is always from the grassroots. And therefore I'm against, to some extent, this practice of taking a dictionary of literary terms in English and then translating them into Swahili, and then kwenda kupekua, how does this fit into an English term which has already evolved over years in another culture? We cannot have that. I think these terminologies have to come from the worldviews and the culture and the thoughts of the people themselves. I think this is what now. So looking around, there's such an array of books which are already there, which have been published. So now what we need is moving it onto a conceptual level and theorizing it, not theorizing it on a lower level. Again, perhaps I'm not going to make myself understood, but theorizing it in a way that now is linking all these concepts together, the overview, the philosophy, the practice, etc. together. And that is the task for another 57 years without me, yourselves. Asanteni.
Usiondoke bado. Asante sana. Sasa naomba dada, karibu. Naomba sasa maswali, comments, questions.
Maji,
naam.
Asante.
So think about your questions. Probably I'll start with the first one. The comment you got about theory, which is, of course, I think something that's very much debated at the moment with the southern epistemologies and so on. Right. So I'm wondering, and of course we have examples of dictionaries which exactly work like this in Swahili as well, where you have the English term and then you have a Swahili translation. But I wonder what you actually did at the time, because if we look at the uchambuzi, maandishi, you actually analyze literary works. Yes. So it's not like the first chapter is about functionalism in literature and the next one is about new historicism or something like that. So I wonder what your approach was at the time, and if there is not another terminology or another approach coming from the early, not only your books, but also the books which were produced at the time.
Right, right. Okay, 2 points. Point number one, we were in a sense down the mines. We were actually producing so that we were digging, as it were. We had not yet taken that to the refinement stage of, okay. But at the same time, looking at what my teachers were giving out at SOAS and the places, like Lyndon Harris, his PhD thesis, which then became Swahili poetry, the book Swahili Poetry, you see him giving a survey of Swahili poetry from the university, because at that time that was appropriate for a PhD. Just even to give a survey was a very good idea. But then, after some time, you find that in East Africa, the Institute of Swahili Research, it started publishing this view on Nadharia. Now, of course, the word Nadharia is very interesting in itself. Nadharia is a view. Okay, it is but it has been now translated as theory. So now, the second approach, which is my second point, is that what we need is what I said earlier, that at the moment I cannot think offhand, but there are so many books, including your own on Utendi. Okay, now that is already towards theory, if not theory itself. Towards. No.
That's another discussion.
Yeah, but what I mean is there is already analysis of a genre. Okay, now that analysis of a genre on Tarab, there's been so much on Tarab. Okay, now, how do you place it in theorizing? Okay, you have Kai's books on philosophy, Nicolini's books, okay, Alena Retova, you have those. Now, we need a synthesis in a way that it can actually bring out the thoughts. I mean, I see Andrew's here. Okay, the type of the intermingling of genres in terms of, okay, well, we have music, but I'm interested in the text. Now, we need somehow a systematic approach into the production of that type. I'm being idealistic, perhaps. If Arnold Kettle were in the audience, he would reprimand me again. But still, I feel that we need to have a systemic. I think Kai wants to speak.
And you think 57 years will be enough?
I don't know.
Sure. I think it comes back to a discussion about what is Swahili studies that Elena and me have been also having.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Farouk. And I wanted to link into this same question because I think while these big challenges of so-called decolonization of knowledge are so important, I think in the current debates also the historical processes and achievements or the takes from the time are neglected. So I think we need a real thorough rereading and re-understanding of what, how those processes you were involved in and others already contributed significantly. I think this is, in the current debate, something neglected also by an Anglophone sort of dominance. So this attention to the way which, in this case, Swahili terms, conceptions, writers, and so on were cultivated and so on. So maybe you could say a bit more to this example that you flagged up yourself on Fasihi, and I wonder whether maybe like having a sort of a thorough essayistic sort of recollection and analysis by yourself on how this term was chosen and attributed might be a wonderful sort of contribution of one example of how this has been attempted to be thought through. But already at the time was a conscious step towards something like decolonization without using that term, perhaps.
Right.
I wonder what you think.
Right. Well, thank you, Kai, for that comment. The way I remember, I mean, even looking back, you can actually infer this. And that is, one was easy way, one of the hard way. The easier way was to fall back on Arabic. So you see, Fasihi is from the Arabic, right? And the other is Tamthiliya. I gave you those two examples. Again, the same thing. Whereas you find Mutembei, for instance, he has taken the word Korasi, okay, from the chorus, and he has taken it from the Greek, given the Greek background, and then extended it to apply to Swahili. Now, we may or may not agree with what his extension, but the fact that he attempted it, I think that is very important. Okay, so that is one point. The other point is actually to look into the traditional terminologies, traditional of other African languages. For instance, Mulokozi, he had published a whole volume on the Enanga. Okay, now. So now the question is, how does the Enanga and the Utendi, for instance, what are the commonalities? I think that type of, those processes, I think, went on as such. But actually, coining terminologies is quite a complex process, which unfortunately is simplified by newspapers. Because in newspapers, you just pick a word and put it for the next day's word, and then that catches on, but there is no grounding as such for it except for one's own. Okay, but certainly I agree with you. If we had documented this, the way consciously, the way now we look at it, then it would have been really wonderful to see. Okay, is there a discussion, minutes of a discussion on how Fasihi came about? I can only give you what my memory is, but so that type of would have been really, really good. And I'm quite sure Swahili is not the only language. I'm sure there must be other languages in the world where the coining of literary terminologies is a process of necessity that people go through because of historical changes, as you said.
So you mentioned at the beginning that Nyerere's stance on translation. So he translated Mabepari wa Venisi, right? And it seems that it was sort of like, it supported what we went and did with the department and the modules, etc. What was your perception and position on Swahili translations with all that which I'm putting, what you taught? What was translation part of Swahili literature about?
I have to confess that at that time, translation was almost on the periphery, but very paradoxically. It was on the periphery, but because the president had done it, so it was very much at the center as well. But the academic approach to it as translation, I think during the years I was there, 68, it was an exercise which was being performed, but not philosophized or thought through. I don't know if I'm making sense. You picked up and you did. Now Nyerere's Julius Caesar was critiqued by Lyndon Harris, by others, and again you look at it in terms of terminologies, and you can find that he himself says it in his introduction, if I remember correctly, that he's not following the iambic meter of Shakespeare, and that he's translating it as he felt Swahili would be spoken as such. So that way, and then of course there is the terminology. Sometimes he gets stuck, and you find that he is taking the same English word and then Swahilizing it, and so these are the few. I think you in our conversation once, I think you were talking about the what is called the foreignization and domesticization of terminologies. I think he was doing both, for instance. But I don't remember an academic stance or an article during those times actually on translation as an academic. I think this has evolved, and if I may say so, perhaps for culminating in these two theses, yours and Serena's, on translation. Exactly, now that's my point, by the way, it reminded me. Taking the two theses, that also one can begin to extract theory from that. I mean, see, because both of you have applied different methodologies to your thesis, framing spaces, in your case, looking at Bourdieu, etc. And in your case, you applied the translating principles for the first time, if I may say so. I think it is true, yeah. So there is so much scope. But again, we need 57 years. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah?
George.
The microphone, I think, disappeared somewhere. Oh, yes. Also, it's George. You just have to
We
wait
welcome
closer
the
to your
morning.
mouth.
Msamiati.
Nafikiri hasa siasa sasa ndio msingi wenyewe. Siasa ndio inabariki hasa msamiati.
Naam.
Wewe ukizungumzia kwamba unaweza ukachukua neno kutoka kwa wengine, lakini hilo neno kutoka kwa wengine kule, ile neno kufika hapo ile kumekuwa na mapinduzi zaidi kule ya kilugha. Sisi tumechukua tu tukaja tukaweka katika lugha yetu. Tulivyosema, na mimi nakwambia ni kweli, hiyo ni siasa. Basi tuchukue leo wewe unakwenda Zanzibar. Utaona kwamba utamaduni wa Zanzibar umebadilika kabisa. Sio ule wa miaka 70. Miaka 70 ukienda na watoto wanakuangalia wanakushangilia na wanakuambia chechei chechei. Haipo tena siku hizi. Siku hizi watu wanashindana na nani anazungumza Kiswahili cha bara. Kiswahili cha bara fasihi au Kiswahili cha bara sanifu. Wanasema na Kiswahili sanifu sio fasaha tena. Fasaha kiko cha sultani. Mafahamu. Kwa wanasema siasa ina jukumu kubwa sana katika ujenzi wa msamiati. Kama wanakuwa wadogo sie, tukipima wafanyabiashara wanapima mizigo kwa kutumia kapani. Unakumbuka kapani? Kapani inafungwa kapani, alafu wanaweka mzigo, ile kapani ikaondoka, ikaja mizani ya mawe. Watu wanapima kwa mizani ya mawe. Lugha yetu ikaanza kubadilika. Ile mizani ya mawe bado kwa imetaka pale. Sema usitaka pale tena ile mizani ya meza. Mizani ya mawe. Alafu sasa imekuja dijito sasa. Sasa hakuna tena mizani ya mawe. Sasa kuna dijito. Wanaita dijito. Basi mkorogani tu haijulikani ile. Kwa mimi nazungumza nasema kwa hakika siasa ndio jukumu hasa kubwa la siasa. Msamiati wote unajengwa kwa siasa. Na ukitaka kuona uhakika huo ndio utaona. Mungu lugha tukuja haipo tena ambayo zamani kwa koloni wakita Kiswahili fasaha. Leo Kiswahili cha kule kinaitwa lazima iwe sanifu sio fasaha tena.
Naam. Uundaji wa msamiati unategemea vipengele vingi. Kuna mambo ya kihistoria hasa ya kwamba vitu vipo, vitu havipo, vinapotea. Nakumbuka nilikuwa nazungumza mara moja na Maalim Yahya marehemu, na yeye alikuwa amekuja ofisini pale SOAS, akaniambia sisi tu apply grant ya endangered languages. Nikamwambia nini language gani endangered? Maalim akasema Kiswahili. Akasema kwa sababu Kiswahili cha pwani ya Mombasa kinapotea. Na msamiati akanipa mfano mmoja, na mimi samahani nimesahau, lakini nitakwambieni labda watu kutoka nini Bwana Saleh Kadara labda atatuambia. Anasema kile kibiriti cha zamani, kile kijitaa kidogo unakiwasha, unakiweka juu ya kabati ili ule mwangaza uenee. Hasa ule moshi unaotoka kwenye ule moto unakwenda kwenye ile dari pale, inafanya weusi. Hasa ule weusi na jina lake. Akaniambia sasa, akanipa jina lake, lakini mimi sikuliandika, maana ndio hivyo watoto sasa wakisema tunasahau. Kwa hivyo akaniambia ina jina lake lile linapotea. Sasa basi kama tukichukua mifano hiyo, basi tunaona kuwa msamiati ina maana nyingi, ina tuseme njia nyingi, sio kupotea tu, lakini pia kujengeka. Leo Shakespeare angekuwa yuhai, angeona ajabu. Maana kuna hizi kutoka vocabulary ya nini, msamiati wa hizi nini simu tu, ingemshangaza. Siku moja mimi nilimuuliza mwenzangu kule, nikamwambia hebu fikiri, ingekuwa ipo mobile wakati wa Romeo and Juliet, wasingekufa hawa. Wanapigiana simu tu. Basi asante, naona nafikiri wakati umepita. Of students. Inshallah. Asanteni bwana.